All right, welcome everybody to this afternoon's panel. We've had a lot of great presentations so far, and we're going to mix it up a bit here by having a panel that's going to have a broad-ranging conversation about all sorts of questions that have come up and that are on your minds. So our panel today is, I'm John Goyette, Vice President for Advancement and Dean Emeritus at Thomas Aquinas College, and I have Mark Matthews, who's an AI research scientist with a preeminent technology company. He's a frequent podcaster and commentator on AI and its social implications. And then I have Dr. Christopher Kaczor, who's a longtime professor of philosophy at Loyola Marymount University. He was a former student of Ralph McInerney and went to school with many of the tutors here at Thomas Aquinas College. He's also an honorary professor of the renewal of the Catholic intellectual life with Bishop Barron's Word on Fire Institute. And finally, I have Dr. Matthew Peterson, who is the CEO and founder of Forum, which is an in-person event network, and Sentinel, which is an AI-based intelligence service tracking government activity. He's taught at the Claremont Institute. He's taught at Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy and other institutions of higher learning. So I thought I would just kick things off. We've been talking in recent sessions about things like cognitive decline and decline in agency. We've also heard about how amazing AI can be in augmenting someone who has a very active mind, who's thinking about very deep questions. But I want to just have us talk for a little bit about what about the general populace? So not Sherlock Holmes here, looking for a Watson, but your average person. And we've just had a session on artificial superintelligence where we learned that it's going to get better and better. It's going to think faster, do amazing things. And and then with the robot revolution, it's going to be able to take care of most human jobs. So I want to just pause for a moment of thinking about cognitive decline and decline in agency. I was thinking about this quotation from the parable of the talents, which is, "For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken away." So I just want to pitch that quotation. And maybe we'll start on the far left with Dr. Peterson. Like, what are your thoughts about decline in cognitive decline and decline in human agency?
Well, the short answer is no one knows anything. I have no idea, and neither does anyone else. But as with so many new things, but I guess there's two levels that I think about this. One is simply the problem of human virtue. So if you all of a sudden put the regular person in charge of 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, 100 people, all kinds of things will ensue. Not all of it will be hilarity. If you put someone in a position where you give them a power, then they're going to have to exercise a certain amount of virtue in order to use that power well. So that's not a new problem. That is something that you could potentially societally deal with in various communities. And anytime you extend power to the human person, virtue of some kind is going to have to be exercised. So I think there's permutations of that, but let that be. I think that's number one. Number two, though, is something that's more physiological, where you see cognitive decline coming from use of cell phones, screens. I think within the next 10 years, if it's not already well known, it seems to be people who have more money, are more educated, are more aware, or more able to deal with the problem right now. But we already know that if you allow unlimited access to screens to young children, you're talking about damaging higher brain function in a way that's far worse than, let's say, smoking cigarettes to human health and well-being, because you damage sort of higher executive functions over time. So I think on that level, again, there's all kinds of best practices that we're just learning or putting into place for screens in general. I think on that level, certainly there is a danger where people become obsessed, with asking the thing questions. And some of that's a question of design, and again, cultural, like how do you use this tool well? But I think we'll see in the short term, certainly a lot of problems arising, cognitive decline problems arising from a time in which there are no norms, there are no standards. You have millions of kids just using this, to get by in school, et cetera. And I think that will cause problems. Massive problems, actually, I think worse than people realize. At the same time, I'm not a doomer on this. I think you could say the same thing about the sudden emergence of TV in American society, where within the space of 10 years, all of a sudden everyone had a television. It was like an atom bomb went off really communally in Western society, and they're watching hours a day, together. So it's not a new problem, but it's a very real one.
Yeah, I would say I am worried about cognitive decline. In particular, you mentioned about reading, and what I'm most concerned about is writing. So I think that writing is one of the primary ways that people think, and it slows down the cognitive process, because to type, but particularly to write with a pen, you just have to go more slowly. But I think that's actually an aid to thinking more deeply. And so to the degree that grade school, high school, and college students, and for that matter, people after college age, are not doing writing to that very degree, I think that their thinking is going to be impaired. And that also inhibits the ways in which they can use all these large language models. Because after all, if you're asking it various questions, if you've really thought things through in a deep way, you're going to be able to ask deeper, more sophisticated, and the right kinds of questions. So I think it even gets in the way of using these large language models in such a way that it really helps with human flourishing. So yeah, I'm concerned about the lack of writing, and I'm also concerned about the potential for kind of avatars that would suck up the kind of emotional energy that might otherwise be brought into human relationships, so that people don't seek out and cultivate and nourish friendships to the degree that they otherwise would, because they've got their best friend chat in their pocket, and so they spend their time, or at least some portion of their time and energy and attention that would have been dedicated to talking to Chad, their real life friend, now goes into talking to chat, and I think that's not a positive development either in terms of thinking, because I think there's something about a living person that is going to, well, I think it's totally irreplaceable. I mean, you just couldn't have, I think, the same kind of friendship with a large language model as you could with a real person, because you can't really, at least in Aristotle's terms, have any kind of friendship with a large language model and artificial intelligence, because at least for Aristotle, to have a real friendship requires mutual goodwill. But a machine doesn't have a will, so there can never be mutual goodwill. So at best you could have a kind of faux simulacra of friendship. And part of the problem with that is, again, the kind of natural drives that you'd have to making real friends is going to be diverted into the chat friend.
Can I just say one positive thing? Because I should have prefaced my remarks with just a sentence or two. I mean, we are talking about something that is a help to cognition. So I would say we're talking about something that actually is positive, that helps you learn, that can help you learn in amazing ways, and help anyone with access to it learn all kinds of things. So I think there's a difference between TV and what we're talking about. TV is, taking your imagination over. So the irony is that yes, this can lead to cognitive decline, but I would actually frame that in positive terms, that we're talking about something that actually is extremely useful for human beings to learn stuff.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of that in terms of the quotation from the parable of the talents, that if you have a high functioning intelligence that is motivated by wonder and the desire to know, the AI serves as a help, right? It's helping you think more deeply, more carefully. Whereas if you've grown up on letting AI answer all your questions, write your papers, summarize all your readings, you're actually going to lose more, right? So that someone who's got a high functioning intellect can be augmented, but someone who's using AI from the very beginning, maybe they're going to lose more. So they're going to drop down, whereas the ones at the top are going to pop up.
I think what I heard Chris say is that if I pour molasses on my keyboard, I'll type slower and I'll be a clearer thinker. Would that be a correct interpretation?
Well, yeah, so my understanding is that there actually are cognitive differences, apparently, between writing by hand with a pen versus typing. And I think, if I remember correctly, that the difference had partly to do with that writing with a keyboard is much faster.
I can certainly believe that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would echo everything that both Chris and Michael, yes, Matt, sorry, were saying. I'm not a believer in the existential threats from AI and AGI, but I think they tap into kind of a very valid, deep fear of, instead of us being enslaved by this external physical thing, that we will effectively be enslaved by our own desires and our own distractions. And so I come at this more from an entertainment career and just seeing the kinds of things that people are, basically all entertainment is where are people putting their eyeballs. And just seeing all the trends with social media and digital technologies, I think AI will be all of this on steroids. And I really think, the digital avatar thing is something that, I think people will kind of just be sort of unprepared for, just how magnetic and seductive, that potentially will be. So I would worry about that. And I think beyond what's been said about cognitive decline, I've heard it said that it's not that people sort of aren't asking the big questions in life, they're just too distracted to ask those questions. So I think we have a very, deep moral responsibility to undistract ourselves and exercise the discipline that comes with great power.
But are you suggesting, Mark, that right now we have chatbots that are moving to the point where they can carry a conversation with you? But you're saying what's going to happen is it's going to become more entertainment. Like social media is the big draw right for the young now, but you're saying AI is going to become like that.
Yeah, so my job being an AI researcher is we're thinking about, well, what are the future technologies and capabilities? And so it's already been demonstrated. So I have worked on video models. So it's like type in a prompt, you get a video of that particular thing out. It's been demonstrated now that those can work in real time. Those demos were done on things like video games. They were trained on video game data sets. There's no reason you couldn't train those on other things, such as human conversations, so that they could emulate a face-to-face conversation. And so even the examples Vic was giving, those are sort of very cobbled together models. They're not what we would call an end-to-end model. But as soon as you start to combine all these things into an end-to-end model, you get something that's sort of far more compelling. You can hear it breathe, and it laughs at your jokes and can have emotional responses. And it's sort of, I think it's an uncanny draw that people will have to that. So, and honestly, it's like, things can go so much further than that too. You kind of have to remember, this is still some of the early days of AI. So, kind of let your imagination go, and you can don't let it go too far. Don't let it go into the fantastical.
Right.
But it still has a ways to go.
But you're saying all the draw that you get with social media that draws people into doom scrolling and spending hours on your phone, that's going to get more and more baked into AI and AI chatbots?
Yeah, I certainly think so. Yeah. And I mean, you can imagine the horrible uses of it too, is porn, like what that would be like. And, sadly, pornography has been one of the early adopters of almost every technology. So, so there will be, if your question was kind of to what will the populace do? What will the common man be drawn to? I think that will be a serious pastoral concern.
Yeah, so is this right? You're thinking that everyone really has those deep questions about the meaning of life, but the question is, will they be distracted in such a way that they never really think about them?
Yeah.
And the entertainment factor that's...
There's a more important cat video I have to watch. So, who cares about my meaning?
Well, can we pick up on, kind of related to sort of the amusement and the entertainment value, can we go back a little bit to the point that Chris made about chatbots being a replacement for real human friendships? Because it seems like if the chatbots right now are attracting people who are lonely, but they're going to get a lot better. It seems like what you're saying, Marcus, we're just seeing the beginning of that. Yeah, what are your thoughts about how that's going to affect the young?
Well, I think that ends up causing many unforeseen problems. And I think we saw this during COVID, where people were on Zoom for hours and hours, and people thought, well, you can have a meeting on Zoom, it'll be just like in person. But I think certainly my personal experience, and I think many people's experience, is that it really is not like that at all. Certainly, when I was teaching on Zoom, I did the best I could, but I mean, the experience of teaching on Zoom is night and day difference between the experience of teaching in a classroom. Because in a real classroom, you can react more to their body language. You can see more than just 6 faces on a screen. There's so many advantages to being in person. And I think with friendship in particular, that it is something that is personal and therefore best done in person. And so if you're on a screen with a real person, I think that there's a diminishment of the actual value of that interaction. But then if you say, well, it's not even a real person, it's just an avatar you made up, well, the value is that much more diminished.
Can I just build on that? Like, one of my things is the importance of the body. So everybody thinks of theology of the body as sort of, it's all about sex. And it's like, no, it's about so many more things. And, JP2 is very good at explaining the importance of interacting in the body. And we very much are made for, person-to-person communication. So I couldn't agree with that more, that there really is something important about it. And the example I always give, I'm just like, why are there conversations I have with my sister only when she comes to visit me in LA and not when we're on the phone? I have no logical reason. We could have those conversations, but just somehow it's just the right time to have perhaps more personal conversations in person. Mm-hmm. So
I'd say, I don't know if it's a silver lining or just a real positive good that's coming out of, COVID, Zoom, chatbots. And that is that, we're at the point where I never thought in my life I would start a company that is in-person events. And the intention is that in the future, that will also lead to media. But the problem that you have now is people feel this keenly. They know that they understand the value. Again, it might be a bifurcation. It might be, the elites or whatever we're going to say. But there's enough people who they feel this keenly. They want ways in which to connect with other people of like mind on various things. Mm-hmm. So there's a premium on in-person events for this exact reason. And knowing that it's curated, that the right kind of people are going to be there, that it's not going to waste your time, and that you're going to have interesting conversations, and you're going to meet interesting people, and you're going to hear interesting conversations that you couldn't otherwise hear, out there amidst the craziness of sort of the online world, especially in a time where podcasters are, essentially throwing garbage at each other. It's not very interesting if you're a thoughtful person. So you want to be there for those discussions, and that you can, if it is business oriented, you can actually take care of business there, and it's not wasting your time. And then over time, you see these efforts over the last 5 years to start these in-person events and groups, because people want these clubs. They want to make it like a club. They want to go somewhere where they can, as the old Cheers show said, where everyone knows your name. And that desire, especially among the young, at least a certain percentage of them, has only increased, not decreased, in the last 10 years. And I think there's a positive aspect of that, where people are much more intentional because of the chatbots, because of the Zoom. They're more intentional about those relationships, and they're looking for opportunities to be human with other human beings. That being said, it remains to be seen, how many people you put in that category when so many other people are being submerged into the pod, as they say.
The one point I'd add is, I think, excuse me, is that in Magnificat Humanitas, Pope Leo, one of the things he consistently points out, is that AI doesn't have, my words, bodily experiences. We have birthdays, we have funerals, parents, relationships with people. And that is all something that comes with being an embodied being. So I think quite often, we can see maybe some of these problems with AI coming down the road. So often, when I'm asking myself, I'm like, what's the solution? For some reason, I keep coming back to, I'm like, yeah, we need to bring people back together in person. somehow that's a very important part of it. Like, get the screens out of there. Even, my teacher friends, they're like, oh, we're going back to paper and pencil, like that's how we have to do tests now, so.
Yeah, well, I guess it's the more optimistic side of things, is that there'll be pushback. You're saying, Matt, there'll be a recognition of the need for in-person events, the way there's a recognition, it seems like it's growing, of getting like screens out of schools and trying to sort of get off of screens, get off of whatever chatbots or avatars.
Yeah.
I feel like the pinnacle of this, just very simply, was during COVID, being told you could go to mass online. We tried to do that as a family, where we sat there, watching the screen. And I was like, "What are we doing?" Like, that was just a reduction to the absurd to me.
And how beautiful in our Catholic faith, us being the only ones who believe in the true presence. It's just like, that's exactly why, and we have it as such a strong argument, whereas other denominations wouldn't. So.
Chris, do you see any optimism here? I mean, is there a silver lining, do you think, to the the pushback that Matt's talked about?
I do. I sense that pushback also. Jonathan Haidt has done yeoman's work of alerting people to the dangers of excessive use of screens, and I think that his efforts have really paid off. There are school districts around the country that now are not giving people iPads, but apparently the real motivation, I just learned this today, was that the schools, when students have iPads, they drop iPads and they break, and then they have to, it's so expensive that they say, okay, we can't do this anymore, it's too costly, too costly. So I think that's good, and I don't want to oversell the dangers or the drawbacks of AI, because I do think that there are real advantages to that tool being properly used. But I guess I do worry about a replacement or a channeling of energy so much to screens and so much to large language models that it diminishes just the time and the energy available for other things. Just as now with smartphones, not at Thomas Aquinas College, but at many colleges, you see people not talking at all, just walking around, and there's someone right next to them and they're on their phone, and I think that's a loss. I mean, especially if you think about it cumulatively. So think about that person who, yes, it's just one conversation or one walking down the hall, but that's every single day, every hour of the day for weeks and months. I mean, that could add up to, hours and hours and hours of lost opportunities to connect. Hey, how are you doing? To interact, to grow, to have an actual human relationship. And human relationships, I think, especially as you get older, require time. I mean, very young children, I think, can become friends almost immediately. They just start playing. But I think, you get to be a teenager, you get to be in your 20s in college, and certainly later, it requires time. But if a huge chunk of your time is spent interacting with the phone, well, you only have 24 hours in the day, so it's not going to be spent talking to somebody else.
Yeah, and you hear about these young people that they're not really sure how to communicate because they've done so little of it.
So we just text with each other back and forth right now.
Yeah. And then you ask like the AI, what should I text? Like I want to ask a girl out, like what does the AI tell me to say? And then she asked the AI, well, what should I text in response?
That's right.
So you just have the chatbots talking.
That'd be a beautiful marriage, right? You could just have them text each other their vows and
just have your agent
talk
to other people's
That's right.
agents,
Their AI talks to your AI and you.
I mean, that would be so much easier for dating.
It would be a lot easier.
Negotiate dates.
That's right.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about AI and robots. I mean, Elon Musk has talked about the Optimus robot for years. It's always 6 months away. But all these other companies are working on embodied AI in robots. And listen, when I talk to my wife, she's excited about a robot that will do the dishes, vacuum the floor, do the laundry. We actually have these conversations in our family, and we're pretty evenly split of those who are violently against the idea and those who think it's a pretty good idea. We were having a conversation recently where my wife said it'd be great to have something to do the dishes, and one of my kids saying, that's horrible, we really need to do dishes. And the next time, the dishes were undone, my wife said, well, I don't see you up doing the dishes.
Right.
But let's talk about robots. And what do you think about, I get the sense that not too long from now, there's going to be robots, not only in factories, but we're going to start seeing them in homes, and there's going to be a proliferation of robots. What do you think the effect of that is going to be on human flourishing?
Well, my hope is that the robots are especially beneficial in terms of medicine, So I can imagine robots that are able to do surgeries in a more precise way than any human hand could, for instance. And you think of fighting cancer, where robots presumably can target and see exactly how to remove cancerous tumors in a way that, again, no human eye could ever do or no human hand could do. So there are some aspects of robots that seems to me would be almost entirely beneficial. But then other ones, not so much. I'm not so excited about a robot professor. I don't know why, it just makes me a little uneasy. I can't quite figure out why I'm uneasy with this, but I hope that doesn't happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. Robots are definitely on the horizon. A question that came up a couple weeks ago is there a technology that helps make us more human, that you really need to make you more human? And like, I'm sort of at a loss trying to find one. Like, yeah, you can be a great human without robots. You can be a great human even without, a combine to harvest your wheat. You'd be a great human just doing most things by hand. I certainly think robotics will come. I do think it will be a huge economic impact, potentially, long term. But yeah, what effect that will have on people, I think kind of, remains to be seen. I think maybe one of the biggest things I worry about is probably more from the AI side, and it's a little bit of this God of the gaps thing of like writing poetry, creating art, like, oh, I thought that's what made us human. Only humans can do that. And, objectively now, we know robots can do some of those things, AI can do some of those things quite well. And so, will robots just sort of only make us feel even less significant if now they're replacing all these physical jobs that we do? So.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, listening to the conversations today is very helpful. Let me just say something positive about the robots as solving a problem. One of the problems when we say the dignity of work is that it may bother us as human beings that there's always dignity in work, no matter what it is. This is one of the teachings of the church. I mean, so the work can be anything. It can be, menial, can be mental. And I don't think we like the fact that that's true because ego status comes from doing different kinds of work, right? So I'm not as concerned with dignity being taken away from work because there's always going to be some kind of work to do as human. But we may have to get over our ranking and hierarchy. It is sort of the provincial character of the modern Westerners to say, oh, in my field, we blah, 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 right? And that's great. It's good to be an expert in something, but also these categories aren't as self-contained as people like to think, Human skills translate across different kinds of work. So that's one thing. The other thing is if you were to paint a picture of, say, the political problems that plague humanity over time, one of the big ones is, right, who has to do the labor? And you could say, this is a curse, right, from the beginning. And you could say, well, wow, someone has to do this. And so therefore, many societies have said, we need slaves, we need indentured servants. In fact, we hear this today. There's work Americans won't do, and we need impoverished peoples to accomplish these tasks. So you would sort of think in the beginning, the more you have the machine, right, or the robot do the work, the better, right? Even from a philosophic level or theological level, you'd say, well, this alleviates some of that problem. There's always going to be work to do, and so now you can get rid of, your slave class or the equivalent in your society, the people who are oppressed, who are vulnerable. So I don't want to make too much of that because politics is human nature is still going to be what it is, and we're still going to fight about things and everything else. But there is a way of looking at this as a potential solution, knowing that it has these drawbacks. And there's a lot of focus right now on the drawbacks. And I would think that, in great booksy circles where we read Joseph Pieper and, the idea of leisure and all these things, but, life isn't like this. this should be seen as something of a positive, right? That helps you do what? All the human things that are higher order, and to invite more people into that. I mean, that doesn't sound like such a bad deal to me. At the same time, I don't think it's, a panacea, we're going to live in some UBI fantasy society. But I think that especially on the intellectual side and the traditionally minded, it would be good to start with a positive view rather than negative.
Yeah, no, I think that's right too. And I'm just thinking about, you asked the question about, will there be a technology that makes us more human? Well, I mean, I don't know, just think about what I do on my weekends. There's so many chores, so many errands to run. I think, gosh, I'd love to go play golf with my kids, but I don't have time to do that. In a way, that's, I think, what you're saying, Matt, is that you have all these menial tasks that they can be taken care of by the robots. Then you might have more human time besides, so there's spending time with your family, there could be contemplation. You talk about Pieper's leisure, the basis of culture. It does require leisure to read the great books and think about the big questions.
So the example I always like to give is, if you were talking to your great-great-grandmother and you told her about all the wonderful machines you have, a dishwasher, a washing machine, a lawnmower, she would look at you and go, well, what do you do with all of your free time? You must have all this free time to talk about philosophy and whatnot. Right. And it's kind of like, well, wait, what went wrong there? Yeah. And if you really, work backwards, it's kind of like, oh, well, human nature, we sort of became competitive and we wanted more, and we weren't happy with just sustaining ourselves. So it's kind of like it's perhaps a bit of a mistake, I think, to look to technology for these answers when really it's a human nature thing. So the other kind of random point is trying to put my thinking hat on and thinking like, well, what are some positive outcomes from robotics? Like, so when I think about Darth Vader and how he built the Death Star, he couldn't have done that with human laborers. Like, they only scale so large, right? So robots just enable a whole new scale of infrastructure projects that could never before be economically viable. So
that's a good point.
Yeah,
but they could also build the Death Star.
Yeah, details.
I think one thing that comes out of it, of course, with leisure. I mean, you look at the ancient Greeks, when leisure is required, it requires the slave class, it requires the indentured servants. But the flip side of that, solving the problem is then, as to your question earlier, is that if you have leisure, then it's going to require more virtue, not less. And that, I think, is the political problem.
Yeah, so how do you get that? I mean, how do you solve that political problem? You're the politics guy.
Well, let me give you 3 simple steps for the next regime in the 21st century. I think that it's really important right now, especially for the technologists, and you see the people in Silicon Valley sort of grappling with politics in a different way than they perhaps ever had. I don't think you can't separate regime form from this sort of technology. If you're at the level where only a few multinational corporations can exercise or use this technology, develop it, if you're saying that it has the same power as essentially nuclear weapons, the good thing about nukes is at least they're pointed to the outside, right? I mean, they're there to protect you, ostensibly. So you can have a face-off and they're there and we don't use them. As opposed to AI, which will be some kind of engine, right, within a culture or society. So I think what regular people and fancy people are starting to wrestle with is who is going to control this if it's the kind of thing that's going to need to be controlled, and what kind of society will we have or regime because of it. And the easy symbol of it, as we were talking about before this started, is the data center. So the data center issue, forget about the real estate problem. It's like real estate development. I mean, everyone's, you don't want to get screwed in your community. You debate about where it should go. But the reason it's such a hot issue is because it's a symbol of something that either is imposed on the community with centralized control, and you see digital technology. What has happened in the last 10 years? Only a few companies, only a few governments are going to have it. You're going to live in the panopticon, and there's not a lot you could do about it. Can you call it a democracy when you're spied on by, however many, like 50 different people on your phone every day? What sort of government are we already moving towards? Or is the data center going to represent the repository of some kind of subsidiarity? Are you going to have your own AI that isn't, manipulated by larger forces? And so I think that the regime form question is looming. It's large. People sense it. And that's why there's so much electricity around the data center issue. And the question is really, is this going to lead to a centralization of power that really subsumes any sort of republicanism or democracy into it? Or is it going to lead to some kind of subsidiarity? Either way, I would say, I think regime forms, 100 years from now are going to look very different than they do now.
To offer a counterpoint to that, and I understand the threat from, centralization being in the hands of a few, but it was mentioned earlier, the open weight models. And so one of the things to remember is that, you need an extremely large data center to train these models, but to execute it, what we call inference, is a much, much smaller machine. And I would say that the open weight models, at least kind of hardware-wise, are, let's say, only a few years behind what some of these state-of-the-art models can do. And even just recently, like a Chinese startup released Kimi V3, which is, as far as skill, is really, really high up there. And if you're willing to buy about 32 GPUs, you can run it in your home, kind of a thing. So I know people worry about this technology being in the hands of a few, but you look at this open weight trend, and it's kind of like, it's not necessarily going to be like that. It sounds like people will easily have access to some level of it. It might just be a question of the quality. Yeah,
I mean, I certainly tend, what do I know? But I tend to that interpretation that it is very possible that you will have a counterweight, against the big dogs, and I think that should be encouraged right now. But at the least for a lot of people, it seems up in the air, especially when they already know that they've been censored and we've centralized power. So it's a fraud issue, I think, for that reason.
But are you talking about the legal landscape of sovereign AI? Because I think you're suggesting that with these models getting better and better, the open weight models, you can have your own sovereign AI with your own data. You're not giving all your data to one of the big companies.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about.
I think I'm saying, that the capabilities are just a few years behind. Yeah. But you can have your own sovereign local LLM.
And the importance to the political side is that, I very much believe in a kind of new Bill of Rights, the right to compute. You need to allow that to happen, because there certainly is a push against that. And how we deal with what comes from China, right? This is all up in the air right now when it comes to legislation. And it's a very hot issue, and there's a lot of money being spent on both sides.
You mean there might be regulations to try to curtail sovereign AI or open weight models so it's restricted just to the big companies?
Yeah, so the question of China is, should you be using anything from China? Right. And there was just a debate because of this online, where you have people saying, look, we can't be letting them copy our stuff and keep parity. And the argument against it is, no, if this is open, you want everybody to have this, and that's the kind of thing you see it over and over again, right? A regulation in general, tough issue. You say, well, we heard the previous speaker, there's some serious problems here. We need to regulate this. But then, of course, the people who most want to regulate it are some of the largest companies in the space who are, as people are saying, begging for regulation because they want monopolistic control, and there's hardly a fig leaf there, to hide what they really want. So this is now, a very hot issue, and as I say, the amount of money that's being spent on politicians to try to persuade them it's lots. There's lots of money being spent. So I think there is the political angle here is extremely important in order to allow the kind of outcomes we want.
Can we say just to say one more thing or one more feature of the robot question? You talk about all these other machines like dishwashers, washing machines. I find when you pitch the question that way, like, do you like your, sure, like a washing machine. Toasters, yes. There's something about the humanoid robot. Like you talk about robotic surgery, those don't usually look like humanoids. You know, they've got arms, but they don't look like humanoid robots. And I wonder, this kind of goes back to your avatar question and the question of loneliness, but I think most people are more concerned when they think about robots, the humanoid robots that are designed to look like us. I mean, you might have like C-3PO that it's, you know, sort of humanoid, but it looks like a robot. But we're moving in a direction of super realistic robots, and I wonder, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, as I find that's the point where people get more disturbed by something that looks like a human being in their home doing dishes, vacuuming the floor, listening to every conversation. Any thoughts about that?
No, that seems right. I think the physical presentation of the robot would make a difference for how people react to it. So think about, you mentioned C-3PO, think about R2-D2. So if it looks sort of like that, a little garbage can that's moving around, I think people would be much less threatened. On the other hand, if you had a Goliath robot, right, it's 8 feet tall, I think people would be like, oh my gosh, this is just too much for me.
But what if it was an 8-foot robot with big googly eyes?
That's right. Yeah, that might make a difference. I'm a little more comfortable with that. But in a way, obviously the appearance of the robot is sort of irrelevant for what the robot could actually do, either for you or against you. But I do think just as human beings, we react to the appearance of different creatures in different ways.
And I sort of think, the just what you could do with an avatar on screen, I think is sort of far more compelling than potentially having a humanoid robot in person. Like, yeah, that's another step towards realism. But if I just think of like, yeah, everything that potentially, you know, again, God forbid, comes with porn, with kind of like the emotional chemical attachment you can make with just an image, you know, I see that. I think the problems are already all there, I think, in the screen form of it.
Yes, you're saying we're worrying about the robots, but the thing is already going to be just the screen form, and the avatar is going to be the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right
This might just be a practical problem of how you present them, but I mean, just 2 anecdotes. Recently, in Dallas, not far from where I live, going to a place that I go to eat quite a bit, meeting a guy who happened to be ex-FBI and DEA kind of stuff. And there was a guy kind of patrolling a robot around that was walking around, you know, just walking around taking pictures with people. And he looked at it, and I have to say, I confess, I felt the same way he did. He looked at it and said, I just want to shoot it right now. And then the other, which I felt,
if it had googly eyes, though, I bet you.
I don't have a gun on me. I don't know if you do, but I was going to just push it into the lake, you know, that was right nearby. That was the initial impression. And then also, if you think of the Alien movies, no one really has a problem with the android, you know, dying. It almost feels appropriate. But maybe that's like you said, the principled problem is already with us. So you can find ways to design them where they're unobjectionable.
Yeah, although it looks like the human hand, and like having a robotic hand that can have all the movements of the human hand makes it far more useful.
I think certain aspects for sure. I think, manipulation, hands will be the same, but there's no reason why it couldn't be like a short little thing with, you know, 6 hands and
no head.
Yeah, no head, exactly, no head. You know, there's ways they could make them very friendly. I think make them very friendly and just as useful potentially if they wanted to. So it's really, the discussion is kind of more about this, like, this visceral reaction to, I hate this monster that's here to replace me. And
well, when you see the dogs, right? I mean, everyone's seen the MIT videos coming out every so often, and the robotic dogs. Or now they're it must be some fake company, I'm assuming, has the Minotaur or the Centaur, and someone designed this Centaur that looks extremely scary and demonic.
I thought that was real.
I'm assuming it's fake, but that is a perfect example of the different ways you could go.
Well, let's maybe pivot to, maybe we'll have one more question, then pitch things to the audience. But I want to talk a little bit about, we were discussing this morning the Pope's encyclical, and one of the things he gets into in the third chapter especially is talking about safeguarding our humanity and tying safeguarding our humanity to our human finitude and having limits. And I wonder just, what are your thoughts about, because it seems like the AI revolution, like there's this huge competition to build out better and better models, ostensibly heading towards AGI, and just more and more powerful models that are going to do all sorts of great things for us, cure cancer. But what do you think about, that seems to be heading in one direction, and on the other hand, the Pope is emphasizing our kind of brokenness, our limitedness, our finitude, and he even seems to say that's like essential to our humanity. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, when I was reading what Pope Leo was talking about, I very much recalled the work of Alistair McIntyre. So he has this book, Dependent Rational Animals, where he says the Enlightenment vision of the person is kind of as mind alone. And oftentimes in their anthropology, the mind is just the human being. And this is just like something almost like a prison or like a car I'm driving around, and the body is just not really part of you at all. But I think McIntyre emphasizes, and Aristotle before him, the reality that the human person is embodied. The body is not a separate entity from you, and we ought to reject this sort of body-self dualism, where the real self, the real me, is my thoughts, beliefs, desires, and then the body is not really me at all. But if that's true, then it is essential, not accidental, to being human, to be vulnerable and to be dependent. All of us start off life in a totally vulnerable state. All of us would have died as babies if somebody hadn't taken care of us. And many of us will end up life in a very vulnerable, dependent state if we're elderly and we have all kinds of issues there. And then periodically in the course of our life, get sick, in a car accident. So just it's a constitutive part about being human to be vulnerable, to be dependent, and to be interdependent. It's also a mistake to think of ourselves as just radical individuals, unconnected, physically, psychologically, historically, to various groups of other people. So I think if we understand who we are, what it is really to be a human in this sort of way, then the idea of large language models or AI or a robot or whatever kind of replacing us is really an impossibility insofar as what it is to be human is of its very nature this bodily, organic, biological, vulnerable, interdependent kind of thing. And I think that's the right way to think about what it is to be human.
So at most, you're thinking the AI is only going to kind of cover over that so we don't see it as clearly. It's always going to be there, and the risk is not noticing it because we have this idea that we're optimizing and getting better, and human weakness is being taken away, and we have servants, robot servants. Do you see then the AI is mainly a risk with regard to recognizing recognizing our humanity, recognizing our limitedness?
Well, I think one way of misusing AI, and I'm not sure that the people who are designing it have this view, but would be to think about what it is to be human just in terms of our thoughts, beliefs, desires, etc. And therefore, some of these people, I think, have gotten this idea that we could just upload my thoughts, your beliefs, desires into a machine, and that would be me. But again, I think that's the wrong way to think about being human. I don't think that would be me at all, even if it was an exact replica of my beliefs, let's say. But I think it's also relevant for human interaction insofar as if we accept human vulnerability and dependence as just constitutive of being human, I think that helps us react to vulnerable human beings in a different way than if we think of vulnerability and dependence and sickness as you're sort of a deficient human, you're sort of expendable, right? So in other words, this Catholic anthropology is very much in line with something else Pope Leo emphasizes, this idea that all human beings have dignity. I think part of the trouble is if we are so into optimization that we might easily say, well, look, I'm just so optimized compared to these little peons. I'm in a whole different class. I'm in the upper class, and they're, I'm gold-souled, they're only bronze-souled, so I can really pretty much step on them, and right. I don't need to worry about them. But I think Pope Leo's anthropology is pushing against that.
One of the things that makes me think of, about finiteness is that, I forget which psalm it is, but it talks about man, and it says, and yet you have made him little less than a god. And if you think about it, we have a soul which is eternal, which sort of longs for not being bound by time and space. And so when I think about why are digital technologies so seductive, it's because they're not bound by time or space. You can communicate over long distances, and it's effectively, in some way, amenable to our soul, or what will be our eternal state. But as you pointed out, it's like, this is the way God has made it. We need to go through this very important phase of finiteness and limitedness. And I think seen through proper Catholic theology, we can see that. But I think there are, people who don't have that, and they know they're longing for this sort of infinite perfection, and their only answer is, we're going to make this here on Earth. Right. We're going to upload our brain to a machine, and we'll solve cancer and death, everything. And it's just like, no, that will be a fruitless endeavor.
Yeah, and I mean, you're pointing to the theological answers. Finally, our limitedness is what opens us up to grace, right? And and a more supernatural life that we have to look forward to. Yeah, Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, let me start from a positive. I mean, the question is, how do we keep our humanity? First, acknowledge that everything we're talking about was created by humanity. We live in, this is a miracle that we can encode in grains of sand all this information and our own memory. So you think about the monastery as being this place where you look at the past and you bring it together and you write down the memory and the teachings of a community, spiritually, politically, culturally. We have the ability to do that on grains of sand, on the chips, on the silicon, and we can easily retrieve it. This is remarkable, right? This is very human in a way. I mean, we've always been seeking to do this. So I think that's human, but what have we done? And when we talk about a lot of the things we've talked about today, we're talking about a machine that looks back on all the things that humans have written and created and brings that to us. That's incredible, and that's beautiful. I think that is, in fact, very human. But, of course, it may be, I don't really believe this, but it could be, I don't claim to know, that we discover this technology is just not something, let's say Dune is correct, and Butlerian jihad. Let's say that we get to the point where we say we can't use this technology at all without burning down the world. I guess that's a possibility, but I think that the framing of the question really comes from a materialistic society that's exceptionally afraid of death and that's afraid of its own shadow in itself, and in fact is suicidal at this point. So I think the correct Catholic frame is this already represents humanity. It's looking at what humanity made, and it's summing it up in some way or giving us some mean. So the question is, how can we use this for the right human ends? And unfortunately, man has fallen.
Well, yeah, in the parable of the talents, it's the answer isn't don't give talents to some people and only to others. Everyone has been given some talents. Some use it, some don't. That's part of the human condition. So I think in a way you're suggesting, well, if all of the great books of the world are retained in these grains of sand and the chips, and they can be used to pursue the most important questions about the meaning of life, maybe we should focus on the positive, how those talents could be used.
Yes, and I think focusing on that is essential. And then again, the political question is, well, wait a minute, not everyone is going to be able to control this, maybe by its nature, and how is this used and divvied out? And there, I think we are thrown back potentially into something that is familiar to me of the medieval era, where, you know, there's a reason that monasteries existed, and it wasn't a negative one. So are you going to become more scribal? Are you going to have people who are more custodians and curating things in, you know, separate sort of boxes? Or are you going to have a panopticon where everyone is being manipulated in ways that they don't understand? Or for instance, even now, what are we wrestling about? We're wrestling with the fact that if you are one of these large companies, you want that power in some cases explicitly in order to do the kind of brainwashing or psyoping that you could only think, you know, you thought TV was bad, right? This is much more subtle, and it would affect nearly every aspect of human life at this point. And so they're struggling for that power. Okay, well, what should we do about that? Who is going to be in control of this? And this is where many friends, James Polis and others, say, now there's a spiritual question that is political, right? Who is going to be in charge of catechizing the bots, is the phrase, you know, he likes to use. And I think that we're forced to answer that question. And I guess the positive for me is that it's an exciting time to be alive, because these questions are not, you know, these questions are existential, or they relate exactly to what the heck we're going to do in the next few decades.